Hello and welcome to this, our 8th lecture in our series for our course on drought. And today we will focus again on questions of the impacts of drought. But before we get there, let me express the hope that you're enjoying this course, that you're learning a lot, and that you don't find it difficult. Outside of that, I hope that you're sharing this course with your friends because drought is everybody's business. Now, in our last lecture, lecture 7, we looked at the impact of drought on food security and on our water supply. Today, we're going to look at the economic impacts of drought. Now, the economy is important to us. I think you know that because our jobs, our livelihoods, our very way of life, right, depends on the economy that we have. And so therefore, the economy is important. Now, what are the economic impacts of drought? Well, believe it or not, drought do have very severe economic impacts. And it's not only in the regions where drought take place. Let us look concretely. In the first place, as we know, when we have a drought, there's less water. And in many countries, including my own, energy is provided by hydroelectricity. In other words, the electricity is provided by water. And when there is a drought, well, we know there's less water. And so the production of energy is either reduced, and if it's a severe drought, the production of energy, meaning hydroelectricity, stops. Now, can you imagine what that means for an economy? Because everything depends on energy, okay? But even where it doesn't stop, but it reduces, then we have now to turn to oil and to gas, which we have to import, in our case in the Caribbean where I'm from. And guess what? The price of energy goes up. Now, you know from the making of bread, okay, to washing your car sometime depend on energy. Everything depends on energy. So once the price of energy goes up, what happens? The price of everything else, which depends on energy, goes up. And you can see the economic effect right there and then. And sometimes this happens where the situation becomes rather one of almost crisis. Why? Because with the constant rise in prices, people can get fed up and sometimes you can have riots. So from the standpoint of energy, especially when we're talking about countries which depend heavily on hydroelectricity, droughts can have an impact. Now, what about transport? Transport is important for the movement of goods. We all know this. We see it every day. In many countries, rivers and lakes are used for the transport of these goods. Again, when there's a drought, what happens? The water falls. But not only that, those same rivers and lakes, people use more of that water for drinking, for whatever else they have to do. And sometimes, therefore, the water level falls so low that the boats cannot use the rivers and they cannot use the lake. Guess what happened? It therefore means that the transport of goods across these rivers and across these and through these rivers and across these lakes stop. And when that happens, what happens? Well, in the first place, you have less goods and so goods to buy. Secondly, because there's less, prices rise. And here we go again. Because what you have now is not just a shortage of water, but a shortage of food, a shortage of the products which have got to be transported. And that again leads to, as I said, a rise in price. And that could lead to serious economic problems for any economy. Thirdly, we know that there are many water-intensive industries. A matter of fact, drinking water, bottled water is big business in the developed world today. So once you have less of that water, what happens to that industry? Right? The production is less or it has to shut down. In my own country, for example, as well, we do have bottling water companies there. And when you have a drought, they have to shut down or the production is reduced. The point here is this though, it's not just the water is less, but once you have to decrease production, then you need less staff, less people to work. You understand? There's less of that product on the market. So the price rises, people lose their job, and the industry itself is challenged. So that's another important economic impact of drought. And now let's turn to tourism. Many countries across this world, including in Africa, the Caribbean, and so on, we have what is called nature tourism. Okay? Now, that is tourism which depends on, the vegetation, the wildlife, and so on. When drought appears, then that vegetation suffers, the wildlife suffers, right? The rivers, the lakes, whatever you use as part of your nature tourism is affected. But hey, even if you don't have nature tourism, right? You cannot run a hotel without water, without hygiene, without sanitation, and without food. Those 4 things. That is true. So when there is a drought and there is no water, even if your tourism does not depend on nature tourism, you understand? It is going to be affected because your tourism needs beverage, it needs sanitation, okay? It needs to be a healthy environment, and that cannot be done without water. So you see, in those aspects, we know for a fact that drought affects the economy. What we can say, therefore, in short, is that when you have a drought like that, it is not just the shortage or lack of water you must see, but you must see the cascading effects, which include economic cascading effects. Now let's turn to some of the impacts of drought on health. Well, in the first place, as we have said, you cannot live without water. You would live 6 days and then you will die. Generally speaking, you have to drink water. But let's deal with it from the basic first and foremost. Can you imagine running a hospital without water? Think about it for a moment. Any hospital. Can you run a hospital without water? Of course not. It therefore means the hospital services, right, cannot take place if there's no water. And when there's a drought, what happens? We know a decrease in water. But outside of that, your basic sanitation, flushing your toilets and so on, and hygiene depends on water. And if you don't have water, then you have a problem there. But further than that, we know that a shortage of water could affect things like the spreading of disease. You will remember COVID-19, and you will remember that one of the solutions was what? Washing your hands regularly for at least 20 seconds, okay? That was one of the first recommendations to ensure that there is less spread of this disease, right? So what you have here is disease directly linked to the question, you understand, of a lack of water. But we could go on. Think of this. Science has proven that a child in its mother's womb, when you have a drought and the mommy has less to eat and less to drink, the development of that child is also slow. But even after the child is born, and when you have a drought, and there is not enough intake of calories, in other words, things to eat and to drink, what happens is this, that the physical growth and mental growth of the child can suffer. So you see, all across the board, as regards health, drought truly and really affects us all. Medical treatment, generally speaking, is impossible without water. The entire health service needs water for it to run. We would leave it at that for today as regards the impact. The next lecture, lecture 9, we will continue looking at impacts of drought on our daily lives. But for today, I close by reminding you that please read the material, because you would find much more information than these short lectures give you. That's one. Secondly, remember that you can always call us at this number, or you can write to us at this email when you have a problem, a difficulty, and we will help you. Thirdly, again, we thank you for sharing this with your friends, with your networks, and so on. And finally, at the end of this course, as I said, we will be giving you a certificate. So until next time, my name is Richard Byron Cox.